by my co-tutor, Zainab. Hello, Zainab. How are you?
Hi, Homa. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. It's lovely to see you all again. I'm doing well. Thank you, Homa.
Hello, Zainab. So, Zainab and I are here today to talk to you about something that most teachers want to do more often in your lessons, but might find it challenging sometimes. It is setting up pair and group work. So, if you're here already, please tell us who and where you are, and please add your comments and questions about pair and group work in your classes to the chat or comments. So, Zainab, I know a question is about a poll that we ran in our close group in our Facebook community, where we asked teachers about organizing their classrooms, and the popular topic was setting up pair and group work. So, Zainab, I think that group work differs across contexts. So, why not begin by talking about primary and secondary learners? So, what's your advice for setting up pair and group work in primary and secondary classes, Zainab?
Okay, so as Homa mentioned, parent group work is a very, very important part of a lesson. That's where all the interaction happens, where all the students get the chance to practice. So I think we need to ask ourselves questions before we plan how we're going to group them. So some of the questions that we should ask ourselves as teachers is which part of the lessons are we putting students in groups and or in pairs? And which activities are they going to be doing while they're doing these interactions? Also, another important question you need to ask yourself is how can I balance pair work, group work, individual work, whole class work as well? We want to have that variety of learning experience. Also, it depends on the type of task you're doing. Some tasks work better when students are working individually. Some work better when they're in groups or in pairs. So the advice I can give to primary and secondary teachers is to think about why you're doing the group work, why you're doing the pair work, whether it works best with this activity or not, and then to plan it accordingly as well. You also need to think about some challenges that you might face, and how you plan to pair them. So Huma, what about you? What kind of challenges might arise from, planning pair and group work? What can you say about that?
Okay, so Zainab, before I answer your question, I was also thinking about primary learners in particular. I think when you plan, grouping, group work for primary students, I think it's important that we build routines, so it's predictable and also very playful, engaging for primary learners. And I also think that when we ask students to choose their own groups in primary classes, it can get chaotic or noisy. So I think it's useful if it's activity led, and we could ask students to count off numbers or maybe group them by colors, shapes, or animals. So it's quick and easy and less chaotic and more manageable for the teacher. So I think these are a few other things that we need to we need to think about when we work with primary learners. Now, going back to your question, Zainab, about challenges, well, a few challenges could be one, you have students arriving late into your lesson. Sometimes, you might, if this is the first lesson of the day, then you have students coming in late. So, what happens, when students arrive late? Or maybe you have odd numbers in your classes. So let's ask our audience, so how do you deal with these challenges? So, imagine you have late comers into your lesson, or you have odd numbers when you're grouping your students, or how do you work with these challenges? So, Zainab, while we are waiting for some responses to come in, I think it's time to say a quick hello to our audience. So we got people joining us from Mauritius, from Libya. I need for a second. Oh, yes. Okay, it's back. All right. So we got people joining us from Mauritius, from Libya. Hello, everybody. more people from Libya. So Zainab, I can see some of your followers here. um,
Yes.
Oh, and there are some nice comments that have started coming in, Zainab. So one of the audience members is saying, managing the interaction patterns is important to have a fair and equal participation, and we should not let the dominant participants to, hijack or dominate the discussion. So I think it also connects back to the challenges that we were talking about, because when you have mixed ability classes, then there is a possibility that you might have some stronger learners hijacking the conversation. So it's important to think about the balance that you need to strike between the group composition. There are other comments here too, Zainab. There's a comment that says parent group work is used to increase student interaction, encourage active participation, and provide more opportunities to practice language and skills. It helps teachers develop collaborative confidence and peer learning in a supportive environment. That's a very nice comment. That's an amazing comment. Um, Zainab, there's some praise
Um,
for you here. One of them says, "Oh, the best moderator ever, Miss Zainab."
Thank you. Hama, I just want to speak a little bit about the comment on dominating students. So I think this is
Mm,
a big challenge. I think every classroom has that one dominating student who, just takes over and doesn't allow the others to participate. And going back to our post on how we manage group work, a lot of the comments that we got in that post talked about assigning roles. So I do want to mention assigning roles a bit
mm,
here. When it comes to students who are dominating or students who don't participate, because we also have students who just are reluctant to participate and rely on their group members to do everything. So here, where it comes to assigning roles, is probably an important role in grouping students. Is making sure that everybody knows what they're doing, so nobody is left out or is not doing anything while they're working. So somebody is, the person who's taking notes, somebody who's looking for the answer, somebody's going to speak, and you can assign these roles. You can plan them, or you can do it randomly. So if you know a student is more
mm.
outspoken, you can give them the role of speaker. If you know a person is a little more shy, you can give them the role of note taker. You can decide how you want to do this. But I think if everyone has a role, you ensure that everybody participates in that group work.
That's a very good idea, Zainab. And I remember many of our community members also suggesting assigning roles to students when they work in groups. Also, I think there are different ways I think grouping in secondary classes can be, more intentional, and maybe, we can be more flexible, when pairing learners up in secondary classes. For example, they could group based on the topic of interest, or maybe the task. So in the last couple of live events, we talked about using choice boards for differentiation. So imagine, some learners choose, to record a video, then maybe those learners can come together and produce that video together. So it's possible that learners can come together based on their interests, I mean, based on their abilities, and like you said, also based on, the different affective filters or the other needs that they have with respect to working with other members in their group. So there are different ways of doing it. Zainab, we got more hellos. We got people joining us from Philippines, and more people coming in from Libya. There are more comments here as well, Zainab. So one of the audience members suggests asking this is going back to the question about dealing with latecomers. So one of the participants is suggesting asking the class to, bring the latecomer up to speed about what's happening in the lesson. So that's one way of helping them, settle into the lesson. There are other challenges as well that I can see here in the chat, Zainab. So teachers might face challenges with unequal participation, use of languages, which I don't really see as a challenge, but yes, I mean, it depends on the context, classroom noise, off-task behavior and difficulty in monitoring and assessing individual performance. Yes. So I think there are a few things here that we could talk about. Unequal participation. So going back to what Zainab said, I think it's useful to assign roles to make sure that there's equal participation by all members in the group. Um, Zainab, there are also, points about managing off-task behavior and noise. Anything you want to comment on, Zainab?
Yes.
Sorry.
Going back to actually a comment someone made last week about grouping is giving each group a leader. So in our last live event, a community member mentioned a secret leader. It doesn't necessarily have to be a secret leader. It could just be that each group has someone who's in charge, making sure everyone's on task and is guiding them. So if everybody has a role, if you assign everybody a role, everybody has something that they need to do. And on top of that, you have a group leader who's in charge. And then you, as the teacher, obviously are monitoring. I think, the noise level would be reasonable, and people would be on task. The students would be on task if everybody was just assigned to their role, and then made them feel responsible, so they feel that sense of responsibility of completing their role, but then you also have that leader who also feels responsible, making sure that everybody's on task and that the noise level is low. And as a teacher, you can tell the leader what their role is, but you need to make sure that the noise level doesn't get too high. You need to make sure that everybody's on task so that they're like your little helpers in the classroom. I think that would manage group work. It would be more effective in that way.
Absolutely, Zainab. So, Zainab, that reminds me about structured grouping, because not all grouping needs to be random. Yes, I mean, quite often teachers rely on random grouping during their lessons, but sometimes, if the activity, if the learning activity lends itself, teachers can also use structured grouping. So, there are different types of structured teachers could use. We could use jigsaw grouping activities, we could use carousel grouping activities. There's one here that I'd like to talk about today, Zainab. It's called onion rings. Can you see that clearly, Zainab?
Mhm. Yes, I can see it. Yeah.
All right. So yes, so onion rings is one kind of grouping that teachers can use in their classes. So how that works is, for example, you get students into two groups, if possible, if your classroom space permits. So there are two circles. So one, there is an inner circle, and then there's an outer circle. So students stand facing each other. This grouping is great for fluency activities and for repetition, for review if possible. So students stand facing each other in two circles, the inner circle and the outer circle, and they complete the activity. And then, if the teacher wants, they can play some music, and the inner circle moves around. And when the music stops, they automatically have a different partner, which means everybody is, there's one person facing another, and they have to engage with this person, which means the activity is under control. There's less room for noise and off task behavior, and students have to work with each other. So this is one way, teachers can structure or plan grouping in their classes. There are others too. There's also jigsaw grouping, like I mentioned. There's also carousel grouping that teachers can use with their learners.
Very good. Excellent. Yeah. So you mentioned a good point about, everybody has to work with someone. So there's more control. A community member mentioned in one of our posts that he allows his students to work with their friends. So a lot of teachers think, no, we need to
Mm.
separate friends. They'll talk. They won't be on task. But he mentioned something interesting. He said that he allows them to work with their friends as long as they are on task and are actually doing the activity. And we see that sometimes. Sometimes friends actually work better with each other. You'll notice that if you separate them or you have them sit in another
Mm.
group or with a different partner, they actually don't participate as much. So if you feel, it actually does depend on the classroom, it depends on the individual student. If you feel that they actually work better and that the student is benefiting more when they're with their friends, then that actually is a good idea. It's a good idea to keep them together because there's more benefit for them in that way.
Yes, absolutely. I agree with you and the community members, Aina, because I think it's all about striking a balance between
Mhm.
planned grouping and giving autonomy to our learners to choose their own, partner or their groups or friendship groups, basically. So I think, we as teachers, we need to think about, striking this balance in the classroom so students also feel that they have a say in the matter and they become a part of this process. Zainab,
Yeah.
we've been talking about primary and secondary learners. I think one of the challenges that a lot of the teachers around us face today is working with large classes.
Yeah.
So how can we manage, pair and group work in large classes, Zainab?
Well, I'm going to show you first some a layout of different classroom layouts, so everybody can look at this. I hope that's clear. We have three different
It is.
layouts. Yeah, if you can see at the top, there's A, B, and C. So A is an island, B is groups, and C is just, the traditional rows. If you can share with us in the chat box, what is the most similar classroom layout in your classroom? And we'll talk a little bit about how we can manage pairing and grouping in large classrooms as well. So when it comes to large classrooms, first of all, with pairing the participants, sorry, the students,
Mm.
you want to think about the activity. Do you think we should plan how we're going to pair or group them, or do you think we should do it randomly? So depending on the activity, the random pairing and grouping is typical, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, or ABC. Or if they're younger
Yeah.
learners, you want to make it more funny. You can say something like mango, banana, something like that. But then there's also, planned pairing. So when you do planned pairing, you don't really want the students to know that you've planned it. You want it to look random, but you've actually planned it. So there's different ways of doing that. I have an idea here for you that I'd like to show you. It's called puzzle pieces. So this is a fun way. If you can create little puzzle pieces like this that go together, and write the names in advance in these puzzle pieces. So here I just have two random universal names, Sarah and Adam. And I have planned before the lesson that I want these two participants to sit together. So I wrote their names on these puzzle pieces and I hand them out. It seems random when they receive it. They're going to search for their partner. They're going to look for the piece that matches, but I've actually planned this because I want them to sit together. So this works very well with large classrooms, especially when you want them working with different participants, not the same ones all the time. It lessens the chaos as well because everybody just has their puzzle piece and they have to search for their partner. They find their partner and they sit down, and then it seems random even though it's planned. So this is one idea of a planned pairing. Homa, do you have anything you'd like to share with us?
Yes, Zainab, I have an idea too, which again, is planned, but not as planned as yours. So quite often when I work with large classes, Zainab, I think of using review activities also for grouping. So usually when I start my lessons with review activities, and they have a dual purpose. One is of course reviewing the target language, and second is to regroup my learners, and which happens at the beginning of the lesson. For example, if I've taught vocabulary in the previous lesson, then as students come into my class or when I walk into the class, I get students to pick cards randomly. For example, I've got an example here using idioms. So you got the idiom, let the cat out of the bag, and you got the meaning with the picture here. So students pick these cards and they have to mingle and they have to find their partner. So one, like I said, they review the language, and when they find
Yeah.
their partner, they sit down with this person. And now when you have these little groups, maybe four people in a group with a couple of different words, then students can then get together and also practice this language by, they can ask each other questions using the target language, or they can make a short story using these idioms. So I think, sometimes, your grouping can be planned, but can also lend itself to achieving your lesson aims or maybe reviewing the target language.
Excellent. Yes, and I love these ideas. You're getting them on task. You're organizing them, but at the same time, you're utilizing that time to get them to learn. So these activities are great.
Zainab, there are some very nice questions and very real questions coming into the chat, Zainab. There are a few questions about dividing students into groups according to their individual needs without discrimination. So, a few people have asked this question today. So what do you think? What would you say to this, Zainab?
Well, we just spoke about planned pairing and or grouping, so that would work. They wouldn't feel discriminated because they wouldn't think that it was planned. They would think it was random. So you could in advance think about their needs, think about how you want to pair them, how you want to group them, and then do some kind of idea or activity where you put them together. So like, for example, these puzzle pieces, or the idea that Huma just shared. There are several other ideas. You can find them in the some other ideas in the course Organizing the Classroom. Several ideas on how to plan pairing and grouping and how to do it randomly. So you can try different ones each time so they wouldn't really feel that it was planned. But I think the best way to group them is to plan it. It is important that it's planned beforehand so that you put them in the groups according to their needs, according to their abilities, depending on what you want to do. But it does require some planning from the teacher side beforehand in order to do that. So that's one way you can do it.
Yes, absolutely. Yes, I think it depends, because sometimes mixed ability groups can work in this context,
Mhm.
so students come together and they're able to support each other, so differentiation by support. So there is scaffolding and they're able to support
Yeah.
each other. Sometimes same ability groups, work well. So I think as a teacher, you're the best judge and you have to decide what will work well for your students, and especially for the learning activity in question, because grouping does work in isolation of learning context and the learning aim. So I think these are the two drivers, the learning aim and the learning activity. So and then you plan your groups and your pairs accordingly. There are some comments here, Zainab. Okay, so there's a comment here that agrees with what we said earlier. So one of the audience members is saying, in large classes, assigning specific roles like a leader or timekeeper is essential to keep everyone accountable. Yes, that's a very good point.
Yeah, and I like the
There's another
timekeeper
comment
thing.
here. The teacher says, mm,
Yeah, sorry. They mentioned something about a timekeeper. And earlier, when we were talking about larger classrooms and how to keep the noise level down, having someone as a timekeeper is also important. Managing the time, making sure that if they know how much time they have, they will probably be more likely to complete the task, to finish the task on time than to waste time while they're doing it. So yes, when you're assigning a role, whether you have a timekeeper or not, but they should know that there is a time limit. It's important that you give them time and maybe remind them when the time is almost over that they only have 1 minute left or they have 30 seconds left so that they finish what they need to do.
Zainab, we've been talking about timekeeping. I mean, that perhaps leads us into our next, question about working with online classes, because
Yeah.
quite a few of us have been teaching online now, and pairing and grouping in online learning environments can be very tricky. So, what do you think? What are some of the things we need to consider, Zainab? I mean, when we think about working with students online?
Yeah. Yes, like you said, nowadays there's so many teachers who are, I mean, there's a lot of schools that have, online sessions going on during the school year. And then I think a lot of teachers are also doing some private tutoring nowadays online.
Mm,
And I think a lot of teachers think that, oh, but online classes, they're, not as good as, being in a regular classroom because there isn't that interaction. Students, you can't put them in groups, you
mm.
can't put them in pairs. But that's not the case at all. You can do so much in an online classroom. I mean, you have the option of the breakout rooms, for example. If you're using Zoom, they have breakout rooms. Breakout rooms are great because you can plan how you want to pair or group them, or you can do it randomly. So you have that option, and you just need to assign a clear task, and give them a time limit. And what's nice about the breakout room feature is it actually tells them when you close the breakout rooms, it tells them you have 60 seconds. So they actually know they've got 1 minute left. And they're all automatically forced back into the main room. So it also saves the time of making sure everybody stops working. They're all back in the same room, in the main room at the same time. You can use the chat box function as well to put the instructions, to upload the task, upload pictures, anything they need to refer to while they're in breakout rooms. They've got the chat box right there. You can upload pictures, you can upload the task, whatever you need to. You give them the instructions. Just make sure you remember. I know we're all teachers, we tend to forget sometimes. Remember that you actually put it in the chat box. Another thing I love about online grouping is the shared digital tools. So, for example, like a Google Doc or
Yeah.
Padlet. In a regular classroom, students are working in their groups. You don't know what everybody's done until the end of the activity where you get feedback. But when you have a shared Google Doc or a shared Padlet, everybody's putting the work at the same time, and you can read everybody's work while you are working in your group. So it actually has that advantage. And again, you can assign roles. So one person does the researching online, one person is typing, one person is taking notes, one person is the spokesperson. So after they finish the group activity and you come back, one person will talk. They can decide beforehand who that will be, and that person will come and speak about what they've done in the breakout rooms and what they discussed. So these are
Zainab,
some ideas.
yes, Zainab, those are some very great ideas, and I have them summarized here, Zainab, because I was reflecting on online classes just before the live event, and I thought maybe we should give teachers a framework. So I've got this little framework here, as you can see. So it kind of summarizes what you said. So start by giving instructions. C is for checking your instructions. S is share materials, because you might forget to share material, and then you send students into breakout rooms, and then you realize, oh dear, I need to now hop into every room to share the material with your learner. So this is very important, because it cannot be as random as it gets in physical classrooms. So give instructions, check your instructions, share materials beforehand, links to Google Docs in the chat, or maybe images in the chat with your learners, and then do the activity. And very important, time the activity. So the T is for timing, because you need to manage how long the breakout rooms have to run. So time the activity. And finally, feedback. You also need to plan feedback. So I think it's important to instruct your groups to nominate a spokesperson who can then summarize their discussion or their ideas when they return to the main meeting room. So this is a little framework that you can work with. Also, when you work online, you can also use jigsaw reading and listening. You can send links to the listening activity to the different groups, and you can tell them, oh, I want you to listen to only from minute 1 to minute 1.5. So that's your part. So groups listen to different sections of the recording, and then they can regroup to discuss their ideas. So jigsaw reading and listening is possible even in your online environments. You can also do carousel grouping. So after groups have worked in their home groups in breakout rooms, maybe it'll be difficult for you to move everybody around. So maybe the groups nominate one person who moves to the other rooms, listens to their ideas, and comes back and feeds that back to their home group. So you can adapt a carousel grouping activities, jigsaw grouping activities, even when you work online, with a little bit of thought and a little bit of planning.
Thank you very much, Huma. Yes, definitely. I have done jigsaw reading or jigsaw listening. I've done pyramid discussions, and they've worked extremely well with online in online classrooms. All right, so I think our time is up, Huma. I don't know how the time flies in these sessions. But before we leave, I would like to signpost our next week's live event. So the topic for next week is Ask Us Anything About Teaching Vocabulary. So that sounds like a lot of fun, and there's a lot you can do, especially with vocabulary. So we'd love to see you there. Please come with your questions and with any of your comments, and we can discuss them together in our live event next week. So thank you so much for coming today and
Zainab,
for your insightful comments. Yes, Huma.
yeah, Zainab, before we go away, there's one comment in the chat that I'd like to highlight. A teacher
Yes,
has suggested a teacher development idea, and they say that we could observe, our colleagues and maybe, record our own lessons and see how we plan and group our learners. So I think that's a very good idea, and
definitely.
we would like to sign
Yeah,
off, by encouraging, the audience member to think that, they plan and group their learners by using these teacher development ideas, and reflect from that, see what you can do better for yourself and for your learners. So thank you very much for joining us today. It was a pleasure talking to you about setting up parent group work. We hope to continue this conversation in the comments in the community. So please feel free to add your ideas and your questions. We'll see you online. Take care and bye bye.
yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Huma. Goodbye, everyone. It's lovely to see you today.
Thank you. Thank you, Zainab. Thanks, Zainab. Thank you, Philip and Chris. Bye bye.
How to see more of our videos on
Bye.
YouTube. When using a shared device, check you're logged into your YouTube account. Do this by tapping the profile on the main menu. When sure you're in the right account, select Search from the top menu. Search for the British Council Teaching English channel and select it. Look down the page for British Council Teaching English. Tap on it. This is our channel. To be alerted whenever we share a video, tap Subscribe. Then tap Subscribed. Select All to be notified of all our new videos. To see these notifications, tap on the bell in the top menu.